Hi everyone, welcome. I can see lots of people joining. I'll just give another minute just to make sure we've got everybody in, and then we'll get started. Zoom has not been my friend this week. Zoom and I have been having lots of problems, but hopefully today Zoom is going to cooperate. It just might mean that you might not see me, you might only see my screen, which is, you know, to be fair, it's probably not a bad thing. We'll go with that. As long as you can see the screen, that's the main thing. All right, we might still have a couple of people to jump in, but we'll get started. And I can just let people in as we go. Okay, so welcome. Tonight we are talking about play and the play cycle. I love talking about play. It's always an exciting topic to talk about, and it's one that you could probably talk about for hours and hours on end. We've only got 1 hour tonight. Typically these sessions go for 45 minutes to an hour. Just depends how we flow. But I'll kind of get into all the basics and then we'll start with the topic. So if you have any troubles with hearing me, let me know. You can just pop something in the chat box at any time, but we will get straight into it. So first off, I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country. I'm on beautiful Awabakal land today and pay my respects to elders past and present, as well as to any First Nations people that might be joining us on Zoom, and to acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. It was a beautiful day on Awabakal country today, actually. We're in for rain tomorrow, but today was one of those perfect autumn days. All right, this is something I've been doing at the start of all of my online sessions, mainly to help you get into the headspace for professional learning, because that can be a really challenging thing to do, particularly with Zoom. It's a little bit different when you actually go to a workshop or you have someone come out and speak. You kind of get into that space really easily. But I think when you jump onto Zoom, you might have just, I don't know, just finished dinner. You might have just finished working with children. Might have been dealing with your own children, walking the dog, who knows what you were doing. But it's hard sometimes to step into a space where you're thinking about something else completely different. So just like to encourage you to take a couple of deep breaths. Doesn't have to be 5, it can be 1 or 2, whatever's comfortable for you, and think about what you want to get out of the session today. So why you signed up, what you're hoping to kind of walk away with, I suppose. And then if you're comfortable, you can share it in the chat box. You don't have to, but you're more than welcome to. So a couple of really basic housekeeping-y type of things. If you can keep yourself muted throughout, that would be great, just because we otherwise end up with a whole bunch of background noise. Children, which, you know, we love children, but they can be noisy. Dogs barking, you know, lawn mowing, TVs, who knows, all sorts of things. Unfortunately, you will get my background noise, which could consist of nearly all of those things. It's a little bit late at night for the lawn mowing, but almost everything else is possible. As I said before, feel free to use the chat box function if you have a question or something to contribute. I really encourage you to do that. It's great to know that we're here together. It's not just me talking at you. It actually turns it into a bit of a conversation, which is a challenge on Zoom. So we use what we can. And you're welcome to have your camera on if you are comfortable to do so, but you don't need to. As I say, you probably can't see me right now because I don't think Zoom's playing friendly. So, you know, I'm not going to make you have your camera on either. So for those that I haven't met either in person or virtually before, my name is Nicole and I am one of the co-founders of Inspired EC. We've been working as a company for just over 16 years doing what we do. Prior to that, and also for some of the same time, I was a long daycare centre director. Thankfully at a service that really did value play, and you know, I was really proud of the work that we did there around play, and thankfully it still very much is like that today, which makes me feel good. I've got 3 children of my own. As I said, you might end up with some child background noise. Thankfully, they're all a little bit older now, so the noise is limited. It's only if they start fighting with each other, as siblings do, that you might hear them. You might also hear the golden retriever, who's a little bit not so much a puppy anymore. He's a giant 2-year-old, and very much like a 2-year-old. All right, so that's me. What are we going to cover tonight? So we've got lots of stuff to talk about. We get into the basics of kind of what play is and why it's important, and then we'll talk about what the play cycle actually is. So we've got, there's a great little video that I'm going to show you which kind of helps to explain it really well, because it can be a hard thing to illustrate easily. So the video is great for that. We'll talk about how our routines and our interactions impact the play cycle, and also a bit of on the difference between play and play-based, because they are quite different things. So we'll kind of touch on that as we wrap up as well. As I say, if you've got any questions throughout, pop them in the chat box, or you can ask them at the end. I'll also give you my email address at the end. So if you need to get in touch, you can do that afterwards too. Sometimes we go away and think about things later and think, oh, now I really want to ask that question. You'll be able to do that. All right, so first question, what is play? If you've got any thoughts on that, you're welcome to share it in the chat. It probably sounds like a pretty easy and yet also complex question. What is play? How do we define what play actually is? So I've got something in the chat. I'm just making sure. Oh, you can see me. Excellent. Well, I better not pull any funny faces then. It's really hard to tell from my end of Zoom. It looks like it's literally nothing. So that's good. I'll make sure that I'm not pulling funny faces as we go. All right. So what is play? To play means to engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. So that's kind of a dictionary definition, but we know it's a lot more complex than that. So if we're talking about a real definition of play, for me, there's only one place to go, and that is Peter Gray. So I'm going to just pop all of this up because they are not playing friendly with me. Oh, beautiful. We've got some answers as well. Plays anything that a child engages in. Absolutely. If a child, and I think this is where we're going to talk about some of the stuff from Peter Gray, when a child makes a choice to engage in something, it becomes play. When we insist that they engage in something, is that play? So let's have a look at the definitions. I'm just seeing whether, I feel like we just got a little doorbell thing. Yeah, there we go. So Peter Gray, if you are not familiar, author of a brilliant book called Free to Learn, and he's a professor, researcher, amazing human. I've had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time with Peter when he's been in Australia. We had him out some years ago for some professional development sessions. We had him Zoom in on one of our conferences a few years ago as well, and he's amazing. His work on play, particularly, he's done a lot of work on a lot of research on play in hunter-gatherer tribes, really fascinating stuff. But this particular kind of set of information is the stuff that I'd say he's best known for, and it's around his definition of play. So it comes from an article that he wrote for a website called Psychology Today. If you just search Psychology Today, Peter Gray, you will find the full article. He's written lots of articles, but this one's probably his most prominent, so it will come up fairly easily. And he goes into a lot of detail, a lot more than what we'll go into tonight. But essentially what he says is that play needs to have these 5 conditions to actually be considered play. And this is where we can then later talk about the difference between play and play-based. So in terms of real, authentic play, Gray says play is self-chosen and self-directed. So that means that children have actually made a choice to do that thing. So, if we think about self-chosen, there are a whole bunch of things that children will choose to go and do each and every day becomes play. There are also things that children do which can be playful, but have not been chosen by themselves. We might have chosen it for them, or we might have, signed them up for a soccer team, but those kinds of things can be playful, but not necessarily play because they're not self-chosen and self-directed. Gray also says that play is an activity in which the means are valued more than the ends. So what that means is it's kind of like when we talk about art and creativity, and you will often hear the term, and I know I've done some training on it a few times now, that term of process over product. It's the same with play. It's about the process. It's about the actual action of playing rather than an end result. So we're not aiming for an end result. It's just the doing of that thing. Play is imaginative, non-literal, mentally removed in some way from real or serious life. Play has structure or rules which are not dictated by physical necessity but emanate from the minds of the players. And so that might be things like, you think about a group of children playing cats and dogs. I always think about that one because it seems to come up all the time. I visit a lot of services and there's always children playing cats and dogs. I'm not really sure why, but it just seems to be one of those common things. Even though there's not set rules for play, we haven't, got set rules for how to play this game. It's different to say if you were playing a game like Duck, Duck, Goose. There's very set rules for how you play that game. That can be playful. That's not play. If the children start that game themselves, they've freely chosen it and they invent their own rules and, it's just about that process of play rather than someone winning or whatever, that can be play. It's really down to the details. So when we're talking about structure or rules, children will determine their own structure and rules for play. We don't determine those, children do. And play involves an active, alert, but non-stressed frame of mind. So that's another condition or definition for play. So why is play important? So, that's like the big question, isn't it? Why is play important? It's often a question that we probably find ourselves answering to families as well. I know I did a session earlier today on positive school transitions, and that was one of the things that we talked about, is how you talk to families about the importance of play, how you help families to see the value in play, what children are getting out of play to help them prepare for school, or those kinds of things. So there's lots of different reasons. It's the practicing of skills. Children can actually test out skills, ways of interacting, various things that they're doing in a really safe way. They build social relationships. Now, this doesn't always go beautifully, or like we think it will. But that's part of it, that navigation of social challenges, of, this person doesn't want to play the way I want to play. That's really challenging, so we've got that building of social relationships is just a really important part of play. That's how we learn to, we often, families, and not just families, but general society, wants children to be able to share and take turns. How do you know how to do that unless you've experienced that? It's a hard thing to actually teach someone. You need to encounter that, and that happens through play. They can test out theories and ideas in a safe way. And so that's where we often see things like weapon play, or, superhero play, or, death play, which sounds awful, but sometimes the act of, someone dying in the game is children's way of processing what does it mean to die, and for some children, here we go, we're getting deep, but for some children, that might be something that, somebody in their life has died and they don't really know what that means, what that looks like, what happens afterwards. And so they're testing out those ideas and those theories, and it's safe to do so because it's in play. Particularly when we're not involved, when we step out of that play, children feel a lot more comfortable and safe to test out some of those ideas and theories. And then, of course, play is fun. We know that play is fun. We know that we lack it sometimes as adults. And when we do it, in whatever way, we know that we enjoy it, so that's what we want for children. We want children to have opportunities to play. So there's a whole bunch of different types of play. Look, the list could go on and on. There's stages of play, and it could really go on and on and on and on. I've just covered a few different ones, and I thought we'll just sort of touch on them. So solitary play, a child can be engaged in play if they're playing on their own. That's perfectly fine, because they're still going to be freely chosen. They're still creating their own rules and structure within the game. They're just choosing to do it independently. Perfectly fine. A lot of children will make that choice too, or sometimes they don't have that choice. Particularly only child, they can get really good at solitary play, at inventing a game, an imaginary space to play in. Exploratory play, that could link with schema play. If you've ever done any of our sessions around toddlers and infants, you would have heard us talk a lot about schema play. Essentially, it is exploration and repetition. And yeah, I think that's really important to look at that as a different type of play. Imaginary play, we're typically fairly comfortable with what imaginary play is. Cooperative play, so where we're interacting with others. Rough and tumble play, that can also fit up with our physical play as well, but rough and tumble, body contact type of play, again, that can link in with kind of that superhero play as well, or weapons play. Symbolic play, where something is something, we're pretending something, again, links with the imaginary play. Risky play, that's a big one, personal favourite of mine. Children engaging in risky play, doing things that are a little bit outside the comfort zone. And then physical play. So again, as I say, this isn't an exhaustive list. It's just, I suppose, a few suggestions to get you thinking about how wide play actually is, and that it just doesn't always look like one particular thing. All right, so we're going to move on to the play cycle. I'm going to show you a graphic first that kind of explains the cycle, and then I will play you a video. Again, hopefully Zoom cooperates, does all the right things, and we can play the video and get back to where we are. If we don't, just bear with me and we'll get back here eventually. But we'll start with the graphic. So the play cycle, this idea of the play cycle was kind of proposed by Gordon Starrick and Perry Else back in 1998. Typically kind of has been used by play workers, but is becoming a bit more something that people are talking about. I know when I first started in early childhood, we didn't talk about this sort of stuff. It just wasn't something that we learnt about, wasn't something that we talked about. Although now I look back, I can see that we kind of knew about elements of it, but didn't quite have a grasp on what it all meant. So the top one's the play drive, which is kind of the conscious or unconscious thought. So it's kind of the idea to play. Again, this will all become a lot clearer when we watch the video. The play cue is the signal to play. The play return is a response to a play cue. The play frame is the space or the process created for the play. The play flow is created by a cue and a return. And then an annihilation is the natural end of play. So we'll go on and watch the video. It's only like about 2 minutes, I think, and hopefully that kind of makes it clear because it does visualize it really well. So we'll see how we go.
When children play, the space or play space will consist of their subjective internal world and the objective external world of people and objects. We can collectively call the people and objects in the external world loose parts. Children will perceive the external world through their senses. A loose part may stimulate play. We call this an external perceptual cue, and the loose parts afford different reasons for children to play. An external perceptual cue may stimulate a thought or idea to play. This is called the pre-cue. The pre-cue is internal, but is emitted to the external world as a play cue, which can be verbal or non-verbal and is a signal to play. The play return is a positive response to the play cue and can be from another person or an object. The play return goes back to the child's inner world and the play cycle is formed. Within an established play cycle, play cues and play returns continue and children can get lost in their play. We call this flow. The play cycle may take up the whole of the play space, or just a small part and is bounded within the play frame. The adult can support the play cycle in one of 4 ways and does not control or take over the play cycle, or what is termed adulteration. The first is play maintenance, where the adult takes on an observer role. The second is simple involvement, where the adult acts as a resource. For both play maintenance and simple involvement, the adult has a passive role in the play cycle. The third is medial intervention, where the adult provides a play return to a child's play cue and is a play partner in the play cycle. The fourth is complex intervention, where both the child and adults may be issuing play cues and giving play returns in an established play cycle. Both medial intervention and complex intervention have the adult being more active in the play cycle. Eventually, the play cycle ends. This is called annihilation. That is the play cycle in a nutshell.
Okay, so it very much is in a nutshell. It's probably a little overwhelming to think about. I'm just going to, I think I might go back to that graphic. So they use a few different terms, and if you look at the original kind of research and information around it, there's a lot of different terms used. We've kind of used some really simple terms. You'll notice a couple of those are the same, but the play drive, as I say, is that conscious or unconscious thought that can sort of be sparked by anything, really. Play cue, the signal to play, and we saw that with, someone kind of handing a box, like, it's like, hey, do you want to play, kind of thing. Even though they don't say, do you want to play, it's that cue to play. The play return is the response to that. So that's the other child responding. And then we're getting to that play frame. We've created a space or a process for play, essentially like a game. They've created a game within a space. They get into play flow. So that's where, they're deep in their thing, they're just in the zone of what they're doing. Annihilation, as I say, is the natural end of play. So we'll look at each of those. So hopefully that video made it a lot clearer, because it is a really hard thing to explain without being able to visualize it happening. Once you visualize it, and I think seeing that example with the box, but also seeing how the adult can be involved, and we're going to talk about the adult impact on the play cycle as well. The adult can be involved, and often children will request us to be involved, and that might be through a play cue. They come over and they say, for example, you're sitting in the room and you've got some children in the home corner, and someone goes over and they make a pretend cup of tea and they come over and they hand it to you, and they'll hand you the cup of tea, and your play return might be to sip the tea and say, oh, do you have any biscuits to go with that tea? That might be a play return. That then creates a play frame. We're creating kind of a space or a process for that play. The child then might go, oh, yes, I can get you some biscuits. I can go and make some, or whatever. And they go back to that. And so we get into this kind of flow of play. We've got that play cue, play return, and we're involved as adults. Sometimes then we can step out of that. It might be that we are the person to the child started it. It was obviously a conscious or an unconscious thought for the child. Maybe it was provoked by seeing the coffee cup, like they saw the little play coffee cup and thought, oh, I know what to do with that. That's an idea. I will go and I'll take it to you. That's the cue. You'll then, say, can I have a biscuit? That's the return. We've created this game. They might have just as easily done that with a child, but often children will do it with us as adults if they're not sure about how to issue that play cue to another child. And some children do find that challenging at times, and that's why they seek us out for play. So there's nothing wrong with us actually giving a play return and kind of starting that play frame, it's knowing when to step out of that, and we might be able to, part of our play return or, part of that flow, we might actually initiate a play cue with another child and bring them into that and kind of get them part of that cycle as well. So I think it's knowing when as adults to step in, to give that return, but also, to know when we give a play cue. Sometimes we do give cues to play as well. It's just knowing when to do it. And as I say, we'll talk about the kind of impact that we have on the play cycle as we continue. All right, I'll just see if I can skip away from that. Yep. All right, so if we think about each of the kind of sections of the play cycle, and I just want you to think about, some questions. They're not questions you need to answer now, but things that you can think about with your team or in your space. So for the first one, the play drive, how might our environment spark the internal thoughts for play? It's like thinking about that, creating a sense of wonder. So what's in our environment that might spark that play drive, that thought of, oh, I could do this, I could play this game, I could make this up, I could, issue this type of play cue. And it might be simple things like, and I love how they use the term loose parts, because I think we often think of loose parts as, boxes and buttons and, pallets and whatever. And yes, those things are loose parts, but loose parts are essentially just variables. So loose parts can be materials, they can be resources, items, they can be people. So many things can be a loose part. They're just a variable in our environment. So children will use those loose parts as a provocation for play. So they might see a box, for example, like in the video, and see the box and think, I could make that into a car. I wonder if, that could be a car. And so that play cue then might be that they go over and, find some things that look like wheels and they bring them over to a friend and say, let's put the wheels on this box. That might be the play cue. And another friend goes, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go and get the scissors. I'll get this. It's play return. We're getting into that process, that play frame. So looking at our environment and thinking, well, how does our environment actually spark that sense of wonder, curiosity, etc. for the child? That's going to help their play drive. So an environment that is not engaging, not inspiring, we've got the same things out all the time. And look, there's a place for that in terms of repetition. We like children to have access to a lot of the same materials. We also need novelty at times too. And, we need things that are going to make them go, I wonder what that is and I wonder what I could do with it, and some children will be more adept at doing that than others. And that may be because that's how they are at home. I know it may just be their personality. I know my youngest child seems to see things with a very different mindset to her siblings. So she sees a box and it's like, I could do so many things with that. And you just see the cogs kind of turning and all of a sudden she's off, and that for her, the play drive, we're started, she's away. So it's a really simple provocation for her. It might be simple things like putting some pipes in a box or in like a crate near our mud pit. That might be something that sparks the play drive, where children think, I could do something with that. What if I turned it into, a tunnel? And what if I, the brain can go in all sorts of places because we've created an environment that's inspiring and, makes children think. That's really what we're aiming for, is making children think about what they want to do. So next is the play cue. So think about, some play cues that you might have seen children use and how might this go wrong? So, something to think about is how sometimes children issue play cues and it goes beautifully, and another child will respond and all of a sudden we're in play. Sometimes they issue a play cue and that play cue might be, I don't know, say for example, they've found a stick and the child has found the stick and their internal thought is, this could be a really great sword. And so then they run up to somebody and poke them with it. And in their mind, this is a cue for play. I want to play. This is my sword. Come and play with me. and the other child's like, ow, that really hurt, I don't want to play with you, go away, we're not getting that play return. So, the cycle shuts down really quickly. The child might go on and try that cue with somebody else, but that's how it can kind of go wrong at times. We often expect that children can just issue play cues. They can just automatically go and seek out other children to play with, and it'll come naturally, but it doesn't always come naturally. And that's why we see some children who will walk up to a group of children who are playing and hit them, and it's often, I want you to chase me, or I want you to do this. It's still a play cue, it's still seeking out that play, and sometimes they get the return in that the other child starts chasing them and they've gotten what they wanted, but they still might not get into that flow of play because that's not really what the other child wants either. So something to think about. The play return, what might happen when a child does not receive the play return that they were hoping for? So thinking about that, what might it look like if, say, for example, the child with the cup of coffee, they make the cup of coffee and they go over and they hand it to another child, for example, and that child says, oh, this coffee tastes awful, I'm throwing it in the bin. And, for the child who's done it, that's not what they were expecting. And before you know it, they're in disagreement and whatever. So that can stop play. It doesn't always go to plan. It's part of that negotiation and navigation. Sometimes they don't get the response or the play return that they were hoping for, but it might be better than what they were hoping for. It might just be different, might be a different idea that it sparks in terms of the play. Thinking about the play frame, look at how your environment, your physical environment, provides frames for play or impacts on play frames. So in terms of our physical environment, particularly if you're if you've got say you do an indoor program and then you go outside and you have your outdoor program, and children can't flow between the two, and I know that happens in a lot of services because it's just not practical. So perhaps you're indoors and this play starts and the play requires running and big body movement and it requires space. Our physical environment is going to impact on that play because children actually can't use the amount of space that they need to use as part of that play. It can also be impacted when we, for example, and this is part of our adult impact, as we'll talk about shortly, but it can be impacted, like the play frame can be impacted when we won't allow certain things to be used in other places. So for example, I'll go back to the example of the child making the coffee, and they then decide that they want to take it over to the Play-Doh table so that they can make biscuits to go with the coffee. And so they take the cup of coffee and the little plate because they think, well, I've got to put the biscuits on the plate with the cup. So they take that over to the Play-Doh table, and on their way over to the Play-Doh table, somebody says, no, home corner things don't go to the Play-Doh table. You need to take that back. So we limit the play frame. We've actually reduced where they can go, what they can do, what things they've got access to. So we can have that restriction on, their frame of play. So this is where I am a big advocate for children being able to take things to different parts of the space. Sometimes we need to just stop and watch before we intervene. Yes, there are some things that, okay, maybe I don't necessarily want the Play-Doh on the carpet. Most services, thankfully, these days don't have a lot of carpet, which is a really good idea. But, maybe there is a reason I don't want something somewhere, but can we just watch? I think that's our role sometimes, is just to watch the play unfolding and just see where it's going, see what's happening before we step in and say, no, you can't take that there, because there might be a really, really special kind of play cycle happening and we might just squash it. And we don't want to squash it. That's not our aim, is to squash children's play. So sometimes we need to just kind of step back and watch, wait and see where it's going. And I know we worry about, well, stuff's going to end up everywhere. And yes, sometimes it does. But but that's just part of play. Play's messy, play's not neat, play can't be contained into a box. We talk about this play frame. For some children, yes, we will create a small space. They'll kind of go, okay, we're playing this game and we're going to do it right here in this space, and they won't move out of that space, and it all works beautifully. For other children, the game takes place over a whole bunch of space. They need to go here, and then they need to go there, and then they need to go there, and they might be taking things with them, and we need to let that unfold, because if we don't, we squash it and we miss so many opportunities for children to engage in play and get all those benefits that we talked about at the beginning. So that's the play frame. How can we support children in play flow? So that's a question for you to think about. How do we support children who are in that state of play flow? And we'll know when they are, because they're usually not paying attention to us or to anybody else. They're just really in their game. Maybe I've seen it where children have taken on like an accent for their play, like a particular type of play, and they've put on a particular voice or accent or something, and they stick in it. While they're in that play, they're in that voice, they're in that accent, and nothing's getting them out of it. They're in flow. And it's really hard if we interrupt children's play flow. It's hard for them to get back to it. It's the same for us as adults. If we get into a state of flow, and you can look up more about flow state, it's a concept that, and I'll probably get his name wrong because it's very difficult to say, Csikszentmihalyi actually came up with, but if you just Google flow state, you'll find it. And essentially it's kind of that state that we get into where everything else sort of ceases to exist. We lose track of time. And, adults often talk about it when they're working, for example, not usually with children, because you don't lose track of time. It's busy. There's lots going on. But things like if you do a hobby, maybe you paint or read a book, or you write, or, anything like that, you can get into that state where all of a sudden you look at the clock and you go, oh, wow, an hour just passed and I didn't even realize. Or someone comes into the room and you don't even hear them. That can happen in a state of flow. Well, it's the same for children with play flow. They get into that space and they're not really conscious of what else is going on. So we need to support them in that. And so to do that, it might be things like not stopping, where they're taking things. It's observing them rather than just interfering with that. And again, we're going to talk about the adult role a little bit as we go on as well. And then the annihilation, the natural end of play. So think about, when we're observing children's play, how might we know that the play has actually reached its natural end, that it's over? I remember doing a professional learning session we had years ago now with Mark Armitage, and he said something that was a really interesting way of looking at it, and it kind of reframed it for me. I'd always thought about, we need to encourage children to pack up things as they go. So, if Sally's over in the, outdoor space and she's skipping, and, then she drops the skipping rope and moves on to something else, do I stop her and say, go back and pick up the skipping rope and put it back where it belongs so that other people have got the skipping rope? Or is that part of her play? Is she going back to the skipping rope? Is there a whole game there? Do I need to just wait it out and just see and go back? And he sort of talked about, not packing up the space until the very end of the day even, and for us as adults to see our role as supporting children. So it's resetting the space. That's not to say that we never give them any responsibility for packing up their mess, because they do make a lot of mess. We want to make sure that they are aware of that and, know how to kind of put things back for other people. That's kind of an important skill, but it's for us to observe the play that's taking place and accept that, sometimes it'll be messy, but knowing when that play has actually reached its natural end can also help us to know when we might suggest that, oh, are you ready for morning tea now? And we're going to talk about that in the adult role as well. So how do our routines and interactions impact the play cycle? This is where we're going next. So there's a few different things that we can do. Hovering is probably the first one. We talk about the helicopter parenting. We helicopter educate sometimes too, where we actually hover over children's play. And I'm not saying we don't want to supervise children's play and we don't want to be present. We do, but we need to take a little bit of a step back sometimes. We need to be tuned in, but we also need to step back and let them kind of do their own play thing. They will bring us in if they need us. They will issue a play cue to us if they want us involved in the play. And even if they need our support in terms of kind of navigating some of the challenges of the play, they've issued a play cue, someone's given a play return, and yet they've still got themselves in a little bit of a tricky situation around the rules of the game that they're inventing or whatever, they will seek us out. But just stepping back a little bit so we're not hovering over that play, we're allowing it to unfold, is really important for children. By not being observant enough, we can impact the play cycle. So being observant is so important, actually stopping and watching what's happening. How are the children using the space? How did that child just issue a play cue? How did the other child, respond? What's happening next? It's that tuning in to what children are doing. And if we're not observant, then we do things like interrupt. And we'll talk about interrupting in a minute. Not having yes spaces impacts the play cycle. So the concept of a yes space, the terminology is actually used by Janet Lansbury. If you ever work with infants and toddlers, you're probably familiar with Janet Lansbury. She kind of talks about a yes space in the fact of an infant and talks about it from a home perspective. So it's about setting up a space where nothing's off limits. So, it's a safe space where we're not saying no all the time. Children can actually access the things they need. I like to kind of move that onto our bigger picture of early childhood and say that I think we need to create big yes spaces. There's spaces where we're not spending the whole time saying, don't put that there, don't take that there, that doesn't go there, nope, 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 and we do it a lot and sometimes really unnecessarily. The problem is when we don't have yes spaces and we're saying no all the time. And again, this isn't about the word no as such, but it could be any word that we use. But when we do that, when we stop children, we kind of fend them off in all directions. Oh, no, you can't do that. No, can't do that. No, can't do that. Then one, we interrupt their play, which, as they're saying, is pretty important. We interrupt their play, but also our no loses value. So when we actually say no, and we really need to mean no, they kind of lose sense of the importance of no. So it's about saving the no, I cannot let you do that. That's more for a safety thing, or, it's finding ways to say yes to children. Like, can the Play-Doh be taken over to the home corner? Yes, it can. Let's not have carpet in the home corner. That makes that a yes space. It makes it a space where it's safe enough to have the Play-Doh in the home corner. Does it mean that we might be, scrubbing Play-Doh off the little teacups later? Sure, it does. But that could also be something that the children do. We could say, oh, all of our teacups have now got Play-Doh on them and it's dry and crusty, and what are we going to do? Let's get out some stuff and we can wash them up. Like, that's a really easy thing that we can do. We can solve that problem. And yet we say no because we think, oh, the Play-Doh doesn't go there. It goes on the Play-Doh table. And the instant response is often a no response. Unengaging environments can impact the play cycle, as we touched on earlier. If the environments are not engaging, they're not inspiring, we see children that struggle to come up with those play ideas. They're really finding that difficult. The more an environment is inspiring and engaging, the easier it is for children to go, oh, I could do this. This could be that. I could use this for that. And that's where loose parts are so good, because they can be anything. It doesn't have to be a specific thing. It can be whatever I want it to be. Open-ended materials are so flexible like that for children that what might look like, a box might look like a car for one child. It might be a rocket ship for another. it might be a table for another, it might be a dog carrier for another. You could turn that into almost anything. So you're looking for those sorts of simple provocations, open-ended things within your environment. Nature is an amazing provocation for play as well. The natural environment always sparks a bit of thinking and ideas. I know for my own children, we spend quite a bit of time at a friend's farm, and when we go, there's really not much to do there. It's very off-grid, and we don't take things with us. We usually take like a card game, maybe a board game, like Scrabble or something. But other than that, it's really kind of make your own fun. You take books or drawing things or whatever, but after that, it's make your own fun. And I love watching my children play in that space, because they will find a pine cone, and before you know it, they've turned it into a fairy village. And, there's all these little pine cone houses and bits of random stick and wood that have turned into something else. And then there's they've made a slide out of a branch, and there's all of this stuff that comes about from finding one pine cone. So it's that really simple stuff. Interrupting impacts the play cycle. So when we interrupt children with our routines or our questions, sometimes dumb questions like, tell me what you're doing, those sorts of questions. When we interrupt children, we can interrupt the play cycle. So the less interruptions, the better, which kind of links to the overscheduled routines. So we've done a session fairly recently on, or maybe it was last year, I don't know, time goes too quick, but it was on why children need uninterrupted blocks of time for play. And in it, I talk about how in her book, Balanced and Barefoot, Angela Hanscom talks about children needing at least 45 minutes to settle into play. And that's 45 minutes to decide, who I'm playing with, what I'm playing, what the rules look like, whatever. So to settle into kind of this play cycle that we're talking about, they need at least 45 minutes. So if we have a routine where, we have indoor play, then we have a group time, then we have a transition to outside, then we have morning tea, we have a little bit of outdoor play, then we have another group time, then we come inside, then we have lunch, then we have rest time, you get in the picture. It's a pretty jam-packed routine, and it's all, down to the minute, and we're watching the clock, and where children aren't getting the time to actually get into this flow that we're talking about with play. So by the time they've, got the idea, they've got that play drive, like, oh, I want to do this thing. They've issued a play cue, they've found someone, they've, reached out, kind of getting that happening. They've got the play return. They're just getting into that play flow within the play frame. And all of a sudden we're saying, all right, it's time to stop. We need to come together for group time. So we're cutting off before they're getting that chance to get into flow. So really looking at our routines will make a massive difference to children's play. That's how we protect children's play, is by, and I know there are things that need to happen throughout our day. There are, lunch needs to be had, but it's about thinking outside the box. How can we do this in a way that has less interruption to children's play? That's what it really comes down to. I know I've been in services before where they've said, oh, we'd really like to do that, but, the cook doesn't want us to have, flexible lunch times or whatever. We've got to go back to, it's about the children. How do we make that work? How do we support the cook to be able to do that? What are the challenges? How do we get back to the play? That should be what's first and foremost, is the play. So how do we make it work? What do we need to do? What do we need to adjust? And it's not about saying we get rid of all routine and we just have this completely unstructured free day. I mean, by all means do that if that's what works for you. My former service was almost like that. We had flexible morning tea, afternoon tea and lunch. We had spontaneous optional group times. We had bushwalks at different times throughout the day, indoor, outdoor. It was very, very flexible. We also had a really high level of wellbeing for our children. We had really low levels of challenging behaviour when we started having a schedule like that, or a lack of a schedule like that, because we found that the children were actually able to get into their play flow. And so they had higher levels of wellbeing, higher levels of involvement. That links to the work of Professor Farrell-Avis on the Leuven Wellbeing and Involvement Scales. That's another interesting thing to have a look at if you're interested in that kind of thing. But we found that it made such a big difference because we were protecting children's right to play and their time for play. You know, we weren't putting these really strict parameters about when you can play. It was, let's play. Let's play, the learning will happen. And it's my job to see the learning in your play. And then I'll document it, and then I'll add other, provocations that kind of spark the play drive, and, the cycle continues. Lots of stuff there to think about. So what's the difference between play and play-based programs? So for me, quite simply, we go back to Peter Gray's definition of play, about being freely chosen, children are free to quit, the rules are their own rules, they're in a non-stress state of mind, all those kinds of things. That's play. Play-based can be things like, it can be, as I say, the games that we play with children where we say, come on, we're all getting together, we're going to get the parachute out. Now, the parachute's going to be fun, no doubt about it, but chances are it's probably not freely chosen. Sometimes it will be for some children, but chances are we've chosen it. We're going to make it playful or play-based. It's still fun. It's got that fun, playful element, but it's not led by the children. It's often led by us as adults. And I think that's where the difference comes in between play and play-based. Play-based programs typically are driven by adults, even if those adults are responding to, the interests of the children or the perceived interests of children. They are still very much guided by the adult rather than led by the child. Jeff Johnson over at Playvolution HQ created this little kind of diagram. I don't know what you call these exactly, but a little diagram which asks the question in the middle, is an activity real play, play-like, or not play? And so you can sort of see he's got like the grid there. So at the top, things could be real play or play-like, so this flows between the two. If the focus is on the process and the participants exercise abundant agency and autonomy over how the activity unfolds. So that could be said for play-like and real play. Over here on the right side, we've got between real play and play-like, the activity is chosen and directed by participants who can quit when they want. Over the other side, you've got between play-like and not play. The activity is chosen and directed by a non-participant who also decides when it ends. And then down the bottom, focuses on a specific outcome and participants exercise little agency and autonomy over how the activity unfolds. So it's kind of a bit complex to have a bit of a read of it, but you can find it on Jeff's website, which is Playvolution HQ, and I think he goes into a good explainer on there as well, which is really helpful. But I think it's just remembering that, we can say we're play-based programs, and look, schools often say we have play-based first year of school, for example. Children aren't playing. They're not doing what we know to be play. They're not engaged in that free play cycle that we've just sort of talked about. But they may be engaged in play-like activity, things that are still fun and still can be enjoyed, but it's not that freely chosen, free to quit, all of those things that Peter Gray talks about in his conditions or definition of play. I just wanted to share as we wrap up this little quote from my other half of Inspired EC, Tash, and it says, anyone engaging with children should prioritise in their role themselves as protectors of play. Play is priority. And I think that's really important to remember. Play is the priority. That's what we're trying to do. We need to be the protectors of play. So that's things like the decisions we make about routines, the decisions we make about the schedule, the decisions we make about the environment, how we talk to families about play, the decisions we make about whether we have a formal school readiness program or whether we do flashcards and jolly phonics. All of those decisions are about protecting children's play. And I think that's the role that we have as educators. So that was a lot of content, a lot of stuff to talk through. Hopefully it feels a little clearer. Hopefully it's given you some ideas to think about, some things to go away and, maybe talk to colleagues about. I want you to kind of wrap up in the same way that we started and think about what you hope to get from the session, whether you actually got that. Hopefully you did. Hopefully you got more than that. And if you're comfortable to share in the chat box, I think this is an important step, is what are you going to do after this? Like we often have professional learning sessions and afterwards you go away, and especially of an evening, it's really hard to just kind of go, yes, I want to do all these things. Sometimes you go away and you're just like, oh, I'm done. I want you to think about what you do want to do after this. What do you want to implement? What do you want to change? What do you want to work on? It can be just one thing, even something that you just want to think a bit more deeply about, a conversation that you want to have with someone in your team, something that you want to observe in your programs. You might want to research something else a little bit. Whatever that is, if you're comfortable to share in the chat box, I always love to hear what people are kind of committing to do after this. I think once we say it out loud or in text, it does feel like a little bit more of a commitment. Let me see, we've got a couple of new messages. Oh, I love that. New message there. Play-based is an adult agenda created for marketing. Yes. What a lovely lovely sentiment. Like, it is. It's a term that we use to kind of say, oh, we're play-based, we value play. But what they value might be very different to what we know play to actually be. And I spend a lot of time in a lot of services, and I don't see a lot of examples of children getting the opportunity to really get into the flow of play. And I think that's partly because it's not because the educators don't care, it's because we're trying to do so many things, be so many things, thinking that we need to kind of, tick a lot of boxes. And it's that lack of understanding. As I say, when I first did my training, no one talked about the play cycle. And so I didn't know that that was a thing. And I think until we know, we do what we know, and what we know is the traditional kind of routine and our traditional ideas about how children should play, what that should look like. And I think it's once we know something a little bit different, we can try something a little bit different too. All right, I'm just scrolling to see. Someone said, if you read play-based, be assured that they know nothing about play. Excellent. Thank you, Renee. That is a really valid thought. Yeah, I think it's probably true. Especially when people say, well, we run a play-based program, and then I go into their program and what they're doing is definitely not play. That makes it really difficult. Oh, and so there we go. As a question for you, Renee. I thought we were play-based. What do you describe it as? Yeah, good question. How do we describe it? Play, yes. So just play. That's it. It's about us being services that support children's play, that protect children's play. We play. I'm just scrolling back up, making sure I haven't missed anyone's comments. There's a few. Must be chosen by the child, intrinsic. Yep. Yeah, beautiful. All right, there's been some really good comments there. So hopefully lots of playing all day. Yes, that's what I like to see. What does that say? It says on our fence. Oh, hold on. It's just covering it up. Oh, nice. It says on our fence, remember play, we do. That's beautiful. And I think that's a really important thing when we're talking to families about play. That can really help to get families to understand play, is being able to sort of say to them, do you remember what you did as a child? Think about what lit you up, what you enjoyed to do on your, days, particularly when, I know for me as a child, we spent a lot of time unsupervised outside, as a lot of people my age probably did. Getting families to get back into that mindset of what it was like to just engage in play all day long and not have people saying, right, it's time to do this, and then it's time to do that, and then it's time to do that. I think getting them back into that mindset helps them to understand why it's so important for children. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm going to just pop the last little slide up with my contact details. As I say, if you're welcome now, if you've got any questions, to pop them in the chat box too. But you're also welcome to email me at any time if you go away after this and think about something that you want to do, or something that I've mentioned that you're like, oh, I'd really like to know a little bit more about that. We kind of touched on a few different things that I didn't even plan for as we went along. So yeah, if you've got anything that you kind of want to check in on, you're more than welcome to get in touch anytime. As I say, it's a lot of content to talk about in one go, but hopefully it's kind of sparked a little bit of thinking for you about what play really can look and feel like. I think when we can get to that point where children are engaged in real play, oh man, it makes a difference. You know, it makes such a difference with how their well-being is, how involved they are in the program, their behaviour, their interactions, like so many things that I know educators find challenging could be supported and improved by just embracing play, you know, just really understanding, embracing and protecting children's play. So thanks, everyone. I'm just going to double check there was no questions there just to make sure. Beautiful. No, excellent. So have a lovely evening. You can get back to whatever it is you're doing on this lovely Thursday night, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.